Hello, this is Dr. Alan Wegg with OCD Tip number 10, Exposure Duration. This is the second of 3 OCD tips that will cover 3 important variables to consider when designing your OCD exposure and response prevention program. Here we're talking about duration. How long do you want the exposure experience to last? Well, it should be long enough so that you feel a decrease in anxiety through desensitization, or at the very least an acclimation to anxiety. We just sort of get used to the anxiety levels that are there. If you subject yourself to a high anxiety experience and then right away leave that experience, you're only reinforcing the escape response. You're essentially teaching your brain the only way to deal with this anxiety is to run away from it. You're not really teaching the fear centers of your brain that if you hang out long enough, you will be able to manage this anxiety and/or that the anxiety will actually come down. Now, increasing the duration is relatively easy for problems like contamination, where essentially what you'd be doing is touching and spreading contamination for a longer period of time and then waiting a long time before you wash your hands. But there are other kinds of OCD obsessions that don't lend themselves as well to this process and are a little bit more challenging to increase their level of duration. So for instance, let's take the example of fear of loss of impulse control, where you're afraid that you might, let's say, lose control and attack someone in public. There, it's very difficult to increase the duration of the exposure experience. And so what we do is we employ script writing, where you actually write down a story of how you're in public and you lose control and you attack somebody. And then you read the story over and over and over again, thus elongating the duration of the exposure experience, allowing for desensitization and acclimation. So, moving forward, it's really very important to keep in mind the length of the time that you engage in an exposure experience, allowing for desensitization or acclimation. Duration really does count when it comes to an exposure program. This is Dr. Alan Wegg saying, see you next time on OCD Tips.